Hey, heads up to this FMQ. How small is small? Yeah, it's all about let's define some baby steps and how to use them and how to get that goal you really want. Okay, have a listen.
Warning.
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 Warning. You are entering into the unplugged mind of Paul Clough. Too late. Personal Development Unplugged.
Hey, here's the 5-Minute Quickie podcast, and I wanted to talk today about, well, how small is small? And that's in relation to small steps. You know, we call them baby steps, don't we? Baby steps that we can use to achieve our goals. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I overheard someone trying to explain what small steps were. But they didn't quite, well, I didn't get it, so I'm guessing a lot of people didn't get it. And it was to really try to explain this, how to get your goal. And they explained it in the form of a metaphor. And the metaphor was, it's like a ladder. And you go up the ladder bit by bit, which I guess is sort of okay-ish. But small steps, in my mind, once you get used to the small steps, they get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. So have you ever seen a ladder with very little, tiny little width between each rung? Don't get that. They're all pretty standard, aren't they? And have you ever seen a ladder that starts off with tiny little width between the rungs, and as you get nearer the top, they get bigger and bigger and wider and wider and wider and wider? No, don't get that either, do you? But that's what happens in real life. Once you get to handle the small steps become a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, until the way I was told, a lovely metaphor was, imagine trying to cross a river. You can never cross it in one big jump. But what tends to happen is, if you can find a place where there's some stepping stones, and the first stepping stone is really close, and the next one is a little bit further away, and in the end you're just jumping between them and over that river with ease. But you start off small. You start off slowly. But also, you got to remember that thing about, you know, if you imagine your goal at the end of a ladder, leaning up against that wall, make sure you're leaning against the right wall. Because if you're looking at the top of the ladder and you're not looking at the wall, then you could do all that work towards the goal and then realize, well, that's not quite the goal I wanted. Maybe not quite the goal. Now then, what are you trying to say then, Paul? Because you haven't told us anything about what small steps are. Well, here you go. This is my sort of version of how to find those small steps that will get bigger and bigger and allow you to achieve your goal without overwhelm, without boredom. Bit of like in the flow. We'll get there in a minute. You see, the first thing, #1, it's before you do anything about your goal, you've got to recognize and acknowledge what is your outcome. What's your direction? Where you're going? You see, if you know your outcome fully, completely, what you want, where you're going, what you're trying to achieve, then you can start to plan. But the other thing is, you know, sometimes we have this outcome, but we don't think it through. We've got this picture in our mind of achieving it, but we haven't really thought it through very well. So what I like to do is, with my clients and myself, think of that final outcome, the final steps, and just imagine it out there in front of me. See myself actually achieving that goal. And that tends to make you feel good. And then I imagine floating out of myself, out of my body, and actually going into that goal, into the me on that screen, as it were. And feel the feelings of what I think it would really feel like having achieved that goal. Now, the thing is, if those feelings that I feel are not exactly the way I want it, not the way I planned it, but the way I want it, then I've got the opportunity to change that goal slightly until when I do imagine it out there and I do go into that goal, that imagination, that imaginary movie screen, as it were, and go into me out there, and it's exactly the way they want it. Now I know my final outcome. And the thing is, I can feel that feeling. And when you feel that feeling, that's the feeling that I call, and I didn't name this, it's Neville Goddard wrote about this. It's called the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Feeling of the wish fulfilled. Now, how do we get from here, the big picture, with that feeling of the wish fulfilled exactly the way I want it, to those baby steps? Well, let's get it simple. Make it really simple. Not too simple, but simple. You see, holding on to that feeling, the feeling of the wish fulfilled, begin to think. And so I like to write these down so you can see some of the steps, just to make sure you don't forget any. But you just think, what's the smallest step I could do? Keeping this feeling. And then what's the next step after that? Now, you don't want to go too far ahead because you need to actually take action on that first step. But if you think about that first step and it's giving you that feeling hasn't disappeared, then you know you're on the right path, I believe. If the feeling begins to disappear, it means either you've forgotten your outcome or the step's too big and that overwhelm or different emotions come in and they taint down, they take away that feeling of the wish fulfilled. So, start small. What's the smallest step I can make in order that I can achieve the goal and that feeling of the wish fulfilled and keep this feeling? Write it down, think about it, how am I going to do it, and then do it. And then as you do that, what's the next step? The next smallest step. The next smallest step that I can keep this feeling, the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And that's all you do. You just carry on. You could, if you want to know exactly how to do it, you can work backwards. And I did a podcast about that, didn't I? Getting your goals by working backwards. Because that comes back to the first step. Keeping that feeling of the wish fulfilled. And if you keep that feeling and you're just stretching yourself just enough to keep that feeling, you'll be in the flow. Because if it's not too intense, where you get overwhelmed, and it's not too lacking, then you won't get bored. And if you want to know about that, keeping in the flow, go to the FMQ 177, just a couple of days ago. And that will give you that part of it. But so when you know those baby steps and you start them, just remember the 5 keys to success. We've talked about this so many times, but I always like to repeat it. Remember, know your outcome. Next, take massive intuitive action. Well, massive is take action to me on that baby step, because a baby step is massive action to me because you've started. And when you do that, you become aware of where you're going. Have you achieved that baby step? What's the next one? Am I still got the feeling of the wish fulfilled? Am I still in the right direction? If I am, take the next one. If I'm not, because of that awareness, you can then be flexible to come back to another way of doing it, because you're always holding that feeling of the wish fulfilled, that outcome in mind. And as you do that, using that physiology and psychology of excellence, the as if, how would I act as if? How would I walk my physiology? How would I think as if I'd got this dream already? Which is that feeling of the wish fulfilled. There you go. That's it in a nutshell. In a simple ladder up the wall nutshell. But I didn't like the ladder up the wall. It's pretty good, but I just think let's make it even more simpler. Baby steps, feeling of the wish fulfilled of the outcome you want, and then keeping it. And as you keep it, the old Cluffy guarantee means you'll get it. There you go. So do enjoy. Let me know how you get on. Love to hear your feedback. paul@paulclough.co.uk is my email address. There I'm sharing it with you. Anyway, until next time, this is Paul, and I'll speak to you again real soon. Oh. Before you go, this last bit as usual. Can you pay it forward? If there's something you really enjoyed here or any other podcast, my podcast, obviously the Personal Development Unplugged podcast, because we're in this community together to create a wonderful field of integrated learning and changing the environment in the world. Please share it with all your friends. That's the way to pay it forward for being part of this community and getting what you want, because as you share it, it just grows. And as usual, I do ask you if you would subscribe. iTunes. Doesn't take seconds, but it takes a couple of minutes. But subscribe, leave a lovely review if you would. And Castbox is another one. You could do that on both, would be great. And always remember, the hypnosis tracks are at paulcloughonline.com/podcast. Sign in. You get all those 30 plus hypnosis tracks for free. They're downloadable. Get free gifts. The other one went out a little while ago, but you get free gifts. And also have a look around that site, because there's lots of programs. They are going to be changing in price shortly, and one of them is going to actually be changing completely. The Supreme Inner Confidence. I've got like Mark 2, but just have a look at Mark 1. Everything is always moving. But anyway, enjoy, have a look, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye-bye now.
Warning, you are now leaving the unplugged mind of Paul Clough. It's time to fly on your own. Be brave, my friend.
Personal Development Unplugged.